David and Goliath, a story of courage, faith, and an unlikely hero. The sun rose slowly over the rolling hills of Judah, warming the fields where sheep grazed quietly. In the distance stood a young shepherd boy named David, his staff in hand, watching over his flock. He was the youngest son of Jesse, a family not considered wealthy, noble, or powerful, 1 Samuel 16, 1-11. And yet, as ordinary as the day seemed, God was weaving a story that would soon echo through history. David was not born into a warrior's life. He spent long hours alone in the wilderness, listening, thinking, singing songs to God. He learned to use a sling to protect his sheep from predators. When lions and bears attacked, David fought them off with courage that seemed strange for someone so young. 1 Samuel 17-34, 36. But David also learned something deeper out there in the fields. He learned to trust God completely. What David didn't know yet was that this quiet preparation, this hidden season, would make him ready for one of the greatest confrontations the world would ever hear about: the gathering storm. At this time in Israel's history, King Saul ruled the nation, 1 Samuel 9-10. He looked like the perfect leader, tall, strong, impressive. But over time, Saul drifted from obeying God, and fear began to control him. The Philistines, a powerful neighboring people, saw this weakness, and they gathered their forces for war. 1 Samuel 17:1. Their armies marched into the valley of Elah, a wide valley surrounded by hills. Israel's army camped on one hill. The Philistines camped on the opposite hill. Between them lay the valley, a natural battlefield. For days, the two armies faced each other in tense silence. Soldiers sharpened swords, checked shields, whispered prayers, and wondered who would make the first move. But the Philistines had a weapon far more terrifying than any spear or sword. They had Goliath. Enter the giant. Every morning the ground seemed to tremble as Goliath walked down into the valley. He was enormous, described as over 9 feet tall, for Samuel 17:4. His armor alone weighed more than a large man could carry. A bronze helmet covered his head, and a massive coat of scale armor wrapped his body. A spear rested in his hand. The iron point alone weighed as much as a heavy hammer, 1 Samuel 17:5-7. Goliath didn't just rely on strength, he used intimidation. He would shout across the valley, "Choose a man, and let him come down to me. If he's able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill him, you will become our slaves." 1 Samuel 17:8. Then he added cruel, mocking words, "I defy the armies of Israel today." 1 Samuel 17-10. Every time he spoke, fear spread through Israel's camp. Soldiers avoided eye contact. Even King Saul, who once had courage, felt his strength leave him. Bible says plainly, Saul and all Israel were dismayed and greatly afraid. 1 Samuel 17:11. And this didn't happen just once. Goliath walked out every morning and evening for 40 days. 1 Samuel 17:16. 40 days of insults, 40 days of fear, 40 days of silence from Israel's warriors. That's when the story shifts. Because 40 days into fear, God sent a shepherd to the battlefield. A shepherd sent with bread and cheese. David wasn't even part of the army. His 3 oldest brothers had joined Saul's forces, but David still tended the family sheep. 1 Samuel 17:13-15. One day, Jesse, David's father, asked him to deliver food to his brothers, bread for them and cheese for their commander. 1 Samuel 17:17-18. David didn't think this errand was special. He was just doing what his father asked. But sometimes God's greatest callings appear through ordinary obedience. David arrived just as the armies were lining up and shouting their war cries. He left his supplies with the quartermaster and ran toward the front lines to greet his brothers. 1 Samuel 17:22. And that's when he heard it. The deep, booming voice of Goliath echoing across the valley, mocking Israel and mocking God. And something stirred inside David. Where others heard threat, David heard blasphemy. Where others saw a giant, David saw disrespect toward the God he loved. He turned and asked, "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" 1 Samuel 17:26. To David, the issue wasn't about military strength. It was about honor toward God, a brother's anger, and a heart revealed. But not everyone appreciated David's courage. David's oldest brother, Eliab, overheard and became angry. He accused David of pride, of being nosy, of wanting to watch bloodshed. 1 Samuel 17:28. Perhaps Eliab felt embarrassed. After all, he was a soldier and had done nothing to confront Goliath. David replied simply, "What have I done now? Was it not just a question?" 1 Samuel 17:29. Then he turned away and continued speaking to others. David wasn't looking for attention. He was seeking truth. Word eventually reached King Saul that a young man was asking about Goliath. David was brought to Saul's tent. David before the king. Saul looked at David, young, untrained in war, with no armor, no scars, no warrior's presence. And yet David spoke with bold confidence. "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him." 1 Samuel 17:32. Saul nearly laughed. "You are not able to go. You are only a boy, and he has been a warrior from his youth." 1 Samuel 17:33. But David shared something Saul didn't know. He told him about the lions, the bears, the battles fought in quiet places where no one else saw. "Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." 1 Samuel 17:36-37. David wasn't boasting in himself. He was testifying about God's faithfulness. Finally, Saul agreed, perhaps out of desperation, perhaps sensing something different in this shepherd boy. He said, "Go, and the Lord be with you." 1 Samuel 17:37. The armor that didn't fit. Saul tried to help David by giving him royal armor, a bronze helmet, a coat of mail, and Saul's own sword. David tried walking in it, but it felt heavy, unfamiliar, restricting. He shook his head. "I cannot go in these. I am not used to them." So he removed the armor, choosing instead to walk into battle as himself, with what he knew, with what God had already trained him to use. David took his shepherd's staff. He went to a nearby stream and carefully selected 5 smooth stones. Not because he doubted God, but because wisdom prepares while faith trusts. He placed them in his pouch, gripped his sling, and walked into the valley. The giant and the shepherd Goliath noticed David approaching and sneered. Compared to Israel's other warriors, David looked insultingly unimpressive. No armor, no sword, no shield. Goliath shouted, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" 1 Samuel 17:43. He cursed David and promised to feed his body to the birds and wild animals. The Philistine army roared with laughter. Israel's soldiers held their breath. Then David spoke back. Not angrily, not arrogantly, but with truth burning in his voice. "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty. This day the Lord will hand you over to me, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel." And with that, David began to run. The stone that changed history. The valley fell silent. David reached into his pouch, pulled out one smooth stone, and placed it into his sling. With practiced motion, he swung it faster and faster, and released. The stone flew like lightning, guided by skill and by providence. It struck Goliath right in the forehead, the one place unprotected by armor, 1 Samuel 17:49. The giant stopped. Then, slowly, he collapsed, face down into the dust. The Philistine army gasped. Israel stood stunned. The giant everyone feared lay lifeless in the valley. David didn't hesitate. He ran to Goliath, took the giant's own sword, and completed the victory, 1 Samuel 17:51. When the Philistines saw their champion fall, fear overtook them, and they fled. Israel surged forward, shouting triumph, chasing their enemies from the battlefield. 1 Samuel 17:52-53. The impossible had become reality. A shepherd had defeated a giant. After the battle, David carried Goliath's sword and armor as trophies, reminders not of his strength, but of God's faithfulness. Saul wanted to know more about this young hero, and soon the entire nation would know David's name. But the greatest part of the story isn't fame, it's faith. David didn't win because he was stronger, smarter, or more skilled. He won because he trusted God completely, even in the face of overwhelming odds. What this story still teaches today. The story of David and Goliath isn't just about a boy and a giant. It's about every giant we face: fear, doubt, impossible situations, inner battles we feel too weak to fight. David teaches us that trust in God matters more than appearances. 1 Samuel 16:7. He shows that preparation in hidden places leads to victory in public ones. He reminds us that God often uses unlikely people to do extraordinary things. And above all, the story echoes this truth: the battle belongs to the Lord. 1 Samuel 17:47. When we stand with God, giants fall. Closing reflection. Picture the valley after the dust settled. The giant's shadow no longer frightened anyone. Soldiers laughed and embraced. David stood quietly, perhaps still catching his breath, aware that something holy had just taken place. He was still just a shepherd, still Jesse's youngest son. But God had shown once again that he loves working through those who trust him, no matter how small they seem. David versus Goliath is not merely a children's story. It is a timeless reminder. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is choosing faith despite fear, believing that God is greater than any giant standing in our way.